When Ubisoft released Skull and Bones, something unexpected happened. Rather than playing their newest game, many players just went back to Assassin's Creed Black Flag. How could Ubisoft release a worse version of a game they made over a decade ago? Gamers are fed up. But not just with Ubisoft, they are fed up with lots of AAA companies today. And for good reason. It used to be that if a title was made by a big gaming company, you could trust you were getting a product worth your time. Lately though, it feels like the AAA guarantee means nothing. But what if I told you AAA games are making a comeback and that it's happening as we speak? To understand this shift, we need to look at what the big guys have been up to lately, because Skull and Bones is just one bad example, but it feels like the tipping point. AAA games are getting bigger, they're taking longer to make, and too often are just disappointing. The thing is, a lot of the games themselves aren't bad. Sure, Skull and Bones isn't that exciting, but the game has its moments. The combat is addictive and growing your ship is satisfying. But there's a lot more keeping the game from greatness. The audacity of labeling this game AAA feels like a movement in the wrong direction. But unfortunately, Ubisoft has had this issue for a while, and we need to look no further than their cash cow.
You got it!
Assassin's Creed, once an iconic gaming staple, is now synonymous with overdone, outdated gameplay. Not to mention the buggy launches we've had in the past. Trust has slowly been eroded, which is also why people are jumping back into Black Flag. They look at Skull and Bones and remember a different time and a better Ubisoft game, or rather a better pirate game. Call it nostalgia if you want, but despite the giant teams and huge budgets, it's like these incumbent studios forgot how to make games that made them successful in the first place. This is a lot of doom and gloom, I know, but here's the thing. I believe we're entering a new golden age of video games because the titans of the past have some serious competition. There are studios delivering incredible games that people love, and I'm not just talking about indie studios, large studios, developers who have been at it for years. And we need to look no further than Arrowhead's latest title.
Become a Helldiver.
Helldivers 2 crash-landed onto the scene in a way no one predicted, passing 400,000 concurrent players on Steam. For context, that's higher than the Steam peak player count of Grand Theft Auto 5. And Helldivers has been going up, not down, over the past few months. Player count tore through the Steam charts, forcing the dev team to up their max capacity from 100,000 to 800,000 players. And at $40, Helldivers 2 is more than worth the money. So what makes this game unique? I can make a whole video about it, but from the second you start the tutorial, you can tell that the game has got a distinct identity and it just oozes charm.
Activate the Battlefield Injury Simulator.
I'm hit! Sweet liberty! The blood!
Soldier.
It's cinematic and it's hilarious. I've never played another game that feels like Helldivers 2. I definitely can't say that for Skull and Bones. If I had to choose between these two, it'd be an easy choice. Helldivers actually feels like something new. But Arrowhead isn't the only studio making phenomenal and exciting games. The recent Game Awards was swept by Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2. Games that came out polished, full price $60 games, but worth it, with novel and unique experiences. So how does a studio make games like Arrowhead or Larian rather than Ubisoft or EA? Well, this is what a lot of people get wrong. Many point to the size of these companies, and that is partially true. Bigger teams mean less efficiency as communication becomes more difficult. I've talked about this before in my Overwatch video, but many of these celebrated studios are also massive. Larian has around 450 employees, which is comparable to Bethesda, and Remedy Entertainment, the studio behind Alan Wake, is publicly traded and has almost 400 employees. This isn't just big studios bad, small studios good. I know we all want to root for the underdog, but while size can be a factor, there's something else happening.
So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people, and they end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products.
Companies that have been successful for so long, like Ubisoft, start to change. They view everything through sales and revenue. As companies become successful and grow, they need to make even more money. Costs go up, and they need to please shareholders, so they try to monetize their products even harder. Then their products start to suffer, and after focusing on the money for so long, they forget what it means to focus on a great product. Looking back at Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed felt like it evolved with every game. Gameplay was refined from the first game to the second. Brotherhood, Revelations, 3, then Black Flag. But eventually, Ubisoft stopped trying new things with their golden goose and focused on what worked for the masses, finding the formula they thought would make them the most money and doing it over and over. But unlike CD Projekt Red, they still wanted to make these behemoths every year, so the games became more iterative instead of refined, having the same gameplay and lukewarm mechanics. Plenty of stuff to do, but nothing new or exciting. But there is hope for Ubisoft. Last year, they released Assassin's Creed Mirage, 3 years after Valhalla, and it shows. It feels like a breath of fresh air, calling back to the stealthy games like the first 4. It's also set in the Middle East, just like the first game that started it all, and fans love it. Many of which are saying, finally, we're getting back to what Assassin's Creed is all about. But the question is, will Ubisoft fall into their old trap? With 11 Assassin's Creed games in the works, it's possible they might have found a new, clear direction, but I'm not holding my breath. The more a company finds a working model, the less likely they are to take risks. But sometimes taking risk is necessary. Microsoft shut down 20 to 30 Halo game ideas from 343, including an ODST spin-off that was similar in concept to Helldivers. But all these ideas were scrapped in favor of Halo Infinite, which, as we know, didn't have the best launch despite being one of the most expensive games in history. Sadly, those rejected games probably didn't tick all the mass appealing boxes Microsoft wanted, but Helldivers proved that this is what players want. It's the same thing with Larian Studios, who fully leaned into D&D and turn-based combat with Baldur's Gate 3. Even though other AAA studios refused to touch the genre with a 10-foot pole, Larian Studios went all in, and they ended up selling millions of copies. What's going on here? Why is it so obvious to the average gamer, but not the gaming executives? Well, Arrowhead Games explains this issue perfectly. A game for everyone is a game for no one. Certain markets and genres might become less popular, but they still have demand. Be it a PvE third-person shooter, or turn-based RPGs, or a top-down roguelite. These games know what they are and are unapologetic about it. Where it feels like Ubisoft made a pirate game because that was the right business decision. A game to capture the masses. However, when I read Helldivers' Steam page, it sounds like a blast and makes me want to enlist, while the synopsis of Skull and Bones is about as bland as white bread. When making Skull and Bones, it feels like Ubisoft skipped an important step. They skipped the why. Like, why should we make this game in the first place? Who is it for? And what do players actually want? Now, Ubisoft did make a deal with the government of Singapore that forced them to finish Skull and Bones, but Ubisoft had 9 years to make this game interesting and answer these pivotal questions before release. This is what separates the new AAA studios like Arrowhead and Larian from the old. These new studios actually think about these questions and care about the answers. They care about making their games fun, and that's what sets them apart. Good developers don't care if you play other games. They know players follow the fun. If you want to make a fun game, players will buy it. But these older AAA companies don't think like that anymore. The goal now is live service and insane monetization. You playing other games is a risk to their revenue, and if the game isn't a billion-dollar behemoth, then it's a failure, which is why so many genres are untapped at a AAA level. These huge companies prioritize profits first and foremost.
But let me be clear.
Monetization is perfectly fine, and it's essential. But most of these companies have forgotten the most important factor. These games need to be fun. It's as simple as that. This is further accentuated by the CEO of Arrowhead, who said on Twitter, companies need to earn the right to monetize. If your game is overpriced, has repetitive content, is unfun, or lacking substance, you should address these things first. Sea of Thieves is a premium game with a season pass and premium items, but it's thriving because the gameplay loop is so fun and refined that players don't mind. Skull and Bones is loaded with in-game purchases and priced at $70, but it hasn't earned that right to monetize, which is why there's so much pushback. That's why people keep comparing these two games. One feels like a fun pirate game, and the other feels like a product. Rare has earned the right to monetize with Sea of Thieves, but it feels like Ubisoft needs to rebuild that trust. The idea behind Skull and Bones isn't bad, but a profitable business model can't replace a good game, which is why I think we are entering a new golden age. The old dogs of the industry have left the door wide open for the new and upcoming developers to take the spotlight. We have great games coming out from studios I like to call the new AAA. And players are just gravitating towards these studios in droves. People can feel the passion, which is why they are so captivated by these new AAA games. If you look at most of your favorite game developers from your childhood, the state of gaming looks pretty grim. But if you look at the landscape of gaming as a whole, it's never been better. Indies are growing into AA studios, and AA are becoming the new AAA. Now I hope that the new guard will remember the mistakes of the past, and I have some ideas about what the new wave of AAA studios need to do to avoid becoming the next Ubisoft or EA. Because if they're not careful, that's exactly what will happen. But it doesn't have to be that way, and I'm making a video about it, so subscribe to be notified when that comes out. Thanks everyone, we'll see you next week.